Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Today, it's all about stencils. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you several different ways that you can use stencils. I mean, after all, stencils are one of those incredibly flexible kind of art supplies because one stencil can give you lots of different looks. All of the stencils that I'm going to be using in this video are from my newest release from over at StencilGirl Products. These stencils are the Overlapping Shapes collection, and I bet you can figure out how I came up with that name for them, right? Along the way in this video, you're going to see two things that completely took me by surprise, things I did not expect to have happen, and why those things came about. So check it all out in the video. This is a gel print that I made using the overlapping circle stencil, and I'll show you how I make those in just a little bit in the video. Next, I'm going to bring in the Overlapping Circles Filled Stencil, and this stencil overlaps over the first one, except the difference is that there's some of the areas that are filled in, and that's how it can make layering these so simple to create a really complex look without actually doing a lot of work. Once you've got the stencil positioned about where you want it, then you want to bring in a piece of repositionable tape. So basically a tape that isn't super sticky, so you'll be able to pull it up off of the stencil. And then you make one of those fancy tape circles and then put it behind the largest shape that's on there. And that's going to help anchor it in place. So once you've got the tape on there, then reline it up where you want it, push that thing down, and you're ready to bring in the paint. Now I'm going to do a little bionic stenciling here as I'm putting that paint on. Now I'm naturally a loose and impatient stenciler. And when I'm doing something like this and I want to have a crisp line on it, I do things like use a heavy body or thick paint, and I do my very best to go in an up and down motion with that cosmetic sponge using as little paint as possible. Now, as I'm getting to the end here of adding the paint, you might be able to notice where the stencil is and where it's protecting that gel print underneath, where it's keeping that paint from going, so that when I lift the stencil up, some of that original gel print is going to show, as well as the color that I just stenciled on there. Now, I liked this gel print when I started, but after adding this top layer to it of color, I'm in love with this gel print, and that's the power of what adding one more layer can do. Now you can use two stencils together in tandem, or you can use them individually. Like this gel print that I'm doing here, this one's with pan pastels, and I used the Overlapping Hearts Filled stencil all by itself to make this print happen. Because I'm such an impatient stenciler, I like to do things the fast way. And if I want to stencil an entire stencil at once, what I'll do is just coat the gel plate with a layer of paint. I will pop that stencil right on top of it, and then I bring in a piece of paper to take the print. Now that stencil was the Overlapping Square stencil, and it had a lot of little details on it. And if I want that to all come through crisply and cleanly in this print, I've got to make sure that I've got good contact between the paper and the paint. And the way that I do that is by rubbing all over this with my fingertips. Not just my palm of my hand, but actually my fingertips. And I just checked right there and I could see I hadn't gotten that corner well enough. So that's why I'm going over it again with those fingertips, because that's what's going to push the paper around the stencil so that you get a clean and crisp print that easily. Once that paint was completely dry, I took a pen and simply traced around the lines that were there. And by the way, you can think about this as one big thing, or you can think about all the little things that are in there. Like this is just one of the squares cut out of there, so that you can think of this in terms of one big one or lots of little ones. You have a lot of flexibility with this. I was really surprised as I was using that pen to outline things and also to doodle inside some of the shapes, like what I'm doing here with the Overlapping Heart stencil. And I was surprised by how meditative it felt. While I was using that pen, it was like I could quiet the noise in my head. I could sort of let the stress go for a little bit, just find a moment of peace in all of the crazy that's happening right now with COVID. And that really shouldn't have been such a surprise to me, because I know that playing with art supplies is a great way to relieve stress. It's a great way to get back into a functional headspace. And usually for me it's with paint, but this time it's with a pen. Now this isn't the only thing that surprised me. Paint had a surprise waiting for me too. I was smitten with this gray paint. It was like I'd never seen the color before, even though I've had that tube for a really long time and never used it. And then it really just popped with pastels. Now the way I only put color in some of them was by putting the overlapping squares filled on top of it, and then selectively choosing which areas I would fill in, and then trying with different colors and choosing different areas to fill in. So one stencil can give you a lot of different looks here. And then I went all in. I took one of those gray prints and I put the overlapping squares filled on top of it, and then cosmetic sponge paint over the entire thing. And that's what created this look. And it's so easy to do that when you've got that second one as a mask. Then I did it all over again, and this time when it was dry, I took the pen and I outlined all the shapes. The next thing that I want to share about is scissors. Now before I get to that, I want to show you how I make the print. Now I just put that stencil down on a naked gel plate, and I'm just brayering the color right on top of it. Now because I'm putting the color on top of the stencil, I'm not going to have as many white areas on there. If you want to have a very defined and a lot of white space where the stencil is, what you want to do is just brayer the paint on like this and then put the stencil on top. That's how I did the gray prints where there was paint first and then stencil. But this time I'm going stencil first and then putting a whole bunch of paint on it. Now the stencil's still there on the gel plate, and I'm going to put a piece of paper on top of it. So notice how much looser this gel print feels when you put the stencil first and then the paint on top of it compared to that crisp look of the gray prints. Well, now that we've got a print, let's bring in the scissors and really change the look of this. You can cut out one heart or any combination of hearts. So like right here, I'm cutting out 2 of them, and then I'm going to keep cutting out different clusters of hearts on this. Because there are so many hearts overlapping here, you have a lot of options about which hearts you want to cut out. And when you have a bunch of options, that gives you a lot of flexibility to get a lot of different looks using the same stencil. Because depending on which hearts I cut out, that will dramatically change the look of the cluster. And by the way, the clusters like this that you can cut out, that also works for the overlapping circles as well as the overlapping squares stencils. So now, instead of having one print, I now have 3 different clusters or cutouts of hearts that I can use. Another option that you have when using the scissors is to simply cut around the edges of it. Instead of cutting out individual parts and making clusters, you just go all the way around the edge of the pattern. So what you've seen in this video, is this everything you can do with the overlapping shapes collection? Nope, there's even more, and you can check it all out over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com, or you can check it out at StencilGirlProducts.com. All of the stencils are available there, and on each page you see lots of samples where I've made things with these stencils. And in case you're wondering right now, is Stencil Girl shipping? Yep, they absolutely are. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I've got a new one out. And of course, if you want to see more of what I'm up to, check it all out over at acolorfuljourney.com. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.